Well, welcome now to the interactive section. Of course, I'd mentioned that we were having Mashina Wandiga and Felix Kiprono. Unfortunately, they've not made it in studio. I do have Keaton Fields, who's advocate of the High Court. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Tom.
Next to him, we have Kinywa Mashina. Asante sana for making time to come and be with us.
Thank you for having us.
And Gibson Gisore, a constitutional lawyer. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining us. We all know what we are expecting tomorrow. The embattled Deputy President, Gachagua, of course, is facing Senate. And we have seen some decisions that both the lower and the upper house have made. And of course, I want to remove this off the way. What comes to your mind, Gibson? Separations of powers, are we seeing?
Yeah,
into play?
Yes, I think that is coming out very clearly as opposed to any other time. We are seeing a clear differentiation between the roles of the courts and the parliament, whereby we are seeing the courts steering clear of the process of parliament and saying impeachment is a process, let it go on to the end. If there is anything which we need to deal, let's deal after they have done their process. Because they don't want to seem like they are interfering with the process, which is, of course, domiciled in parliament. The other scenario is whereby we are likely to see, because he has still a right of going to court, but it has got to be after the fact, not while the process is still ongoing.
Okay.
Yes, so the court, I think Justice Muita was very clear that he doesn't want to seem like they are usurping the powers of a constitutional body, which is the parliament. Let that process come to the end, and then if there is anything he feels aggrieved about, then he can be able to approach the courts.
To approach the court. And of course, the scenario that is likely to play out for him to go to the court if he's impeached.
Yes.
And so let me bring in Kinywa from where you are. What do you think? What does it mean if the deputy president is impeached?
Well, I think that there are political and legal ramifications that will ensue in the event that he's impeached.
How would those legal aspects look like?
The legal aspects, we can look at the short-term and the long-term legal aspects. In terms of the short-term legal aspects, we are yet to see if the courts will intervene after Senate has, after the trial, if they vote to impeach him by the 2/3 required. We are yet to see whether they will step in and issue conservatory orders to stop the process from going on. Because once they fail to stop that process through the issuance of conservatory orders, then that opens the way for a new deputy president to be nominated and to be approved by parliament. So, of course, when we're looking at the long term, if he's removed, there is still that issue of whether the process of impeachment was constitutional, so to say. Okay. Whether the safeguards were observed.
Okay, let me bring in Keaton, because this is a story that is really in the lips of many people in this country.
Absolutely.
You know, will he not?
Yes.
But I just want you to paint for us a picture of what, in the event that Senate impeaches.
Yes.
First of all, permit me to contextualize and to problematize the question of impeachment. Impeachment is a political tool of governance. And even if you were to problematize also the first issue that you asked about the separation of powers, it is clear even from the concept of separation of powers as espoused by Montesquieu Rousseau. It is clear that all organs of government must perform their distinct constitutional role. And as such, I even applaud the decision by the Speaker of the Senate, whereby in the matter of the impeachment of the Gachagua County Governor, he ruled and he made an authoritative decision that it is not open for any institution or organ of government to encroach into the affairs or constitutional mandate of the Senate or any of the committees, because that will amount to a deadly attack. And I concur with that, because that issue also has been settled by the Supreme Court in Justice Mate case, whereby the Supreme Court has stated clearly and succinctly that the court should exercise judicial restraint, whereby it involves a political question doctrine. And as such, since the matter has been processed from the National Assembly or to the Senate, what we expect the Senate is to try and to determine whether the charges are substantiated or not. And if they are substantiated, that the Deputy President is to hold office within the meaning of Article 145 of the Constitution.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I hear you, but let me just bring in Gibson, because either way, whether he's impeached or he's not impeached, there are certain things that are likely to happen.
Yes.
Okay, because we have MPs who voted, in support of the impeachment, and there are those who voted against the impeachment. So let's just bring in the politics and try to understand how the members who voted for the impeachment, how do you think they're likely to convince their representatives that the decision that they took to impeach the Deputy President was the right one, given the pockets of hostility that we are seeing,
I think that is going to be a very interesting scenario for us to observe, because we do understand that the people of Mount Kenya, politically now speaking, have been trying to surround themselves. That is the ground. The VP, the DP has been very clear that he's a villager. He goes to the village and listens to the ground. So politically must be able to have some following from the ground, save for some politicians who have some pockets of influence.
Yeah.
But we have seen recently, out of the decision by the National Assembly to impeach, we have seen some hostilities do come by associated with some of the members when they went to the ground. So we expect, if this process goes to its logical conclusion, all the fan base or a larger section of Mount Kenya to be able to come in handy and be able to say, you crucified our son. That is going to have a lot of backlash for some of the members who voted for the impeachment of... and this was overwhelmingly, from Mount Kenya, expected that we could have a substantial number, but unfortunately we actually saw quite a number of people vote for his impeachment.
Yeah.
In the event that that process is saved by the Senate, it's also going to be a very interesting situation, because now you have these people to deal with. If you will be having the ground, then it means these members of parliament, all of them will need to go home. They will have to face the arm, and they will need to go home. So it will be very interesting to see how some of these members will be able to cultivate the relationship, especially within the Mount Kenya region, and be able to come or fall back behind him. But the most interesting one is, for me, is really between him and the president, if the Senate does not impeach.
And we'll come to that. Kinyo, what are your thoughts? How do you see it in the event that, the Senate upholds the lower house's decision of impeachment? How do you think the members of parliament who voted for the impeachment motion who will have to deal with the electorate back home?
I think they will be on trial, if you ask me, because we've had situations or we've had a lot of concerns on the public participation issue. We also have a lot of concerns, or there are a lot of concerns about the issue of what was said in the National Assembly and the extraneous issues that came out that might not have been linked to the 11 charges. So, and we've seen a very vibrant public, not only in Mount Kenya, but across the country. We've seen people following this issue, and we've also seen people who do not necessarily agree with the Deputy President feeling this is perhaps a witch hunt to them. And so it's not like they like him, but they want to see this so-called underdog in light of the numbers that appended their signatures to the impeachment motion and the overwhelming support of that motion. So I think it's a tricky political hill.
Okay.
And they will be on trial. They'll have to justify their decisions and how they voted.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, let's take a short break before I bring in Keaton Fields. Of course, tomorrow the embattled deputy president is expected to face the Senate over his impeachment trial. And remember, the High Court, we know, declined to issue those conservatory orders that he had sought. We're taking a short break. We'll be back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Prime Edition. We are speaking with a panel here: Keaton Fields, lawyer, Kinyua Moshina, and Gibson Gisore. Of course, tomorrow the deputy president is in Senate, and there is going to be a debate in the upper house. How will things pan out? Well, we are having a panel in studio to help us get more insights of what likely scenarios we will be expecting tomorrow. Keatons, let me bring you in. Kinyua was talking about giving us a sense of how the electorate might react,
Yes.
in the event that the Senate upholds. I don't know what your thoughts are.
First of all, from the Newton's third law of motion, in every action there is opposed and equal reaction force. The essence why public participation is immortalized under Article 10 of the Constitution was so as to make all the decisions to be people-centered. And we expected all the members of the National Assembly to have consulted their constituents on the way forward, on whether to approve or to accede to that motion of impeachment. Yeah, and if at all they did approve, then we believe that they derived that legislative authority from the people. But if at all they acted contra the people's intentions, then it will follow, therefore, that they stand to meet the people at the ballot. And even from the previous presidents of any electionary period, it can indubitably be stated that 70% of the members of the National Assembly have always been sent home. Reasons? They act contra the people's intentions and or aspirations. So if at all their vote and their approval was not approved by the people, then it will follow that come 2027, most of them will go home. That's my take politically. Because at the end of the day, it is a political process, but they must derive what they are doing, every action that they are doing before the House. It must be sanctioned by the people. And if they act contrary to the people's aspirations and wishes, then they will meet the wrath of the people at the ballot.
Gibson, you had him. Do you think that public participation may be an area of contention? Is that, we know the Senate process will go on tomorrow, but it brings out the question of public participation.
I will discuss public participation in two ways. There is the aspect of what already had been done in Parliament, which of course, as he has rightly put it, that the people were consulted, but the question now which comes is, was the public participation qualitative and quantitative? Because that has got to be captured. Both limbs must be explored to the end. So that is a very big question, especially in the legal circles, whether that should be, because we saw some constituencies where people never showed up. Actually, even the office was never opened. So does that count? Does that amount that these people were represented? When the member of parliament was voting, what was he voting for? Because he never consulted the people, or the people never got to give their views. There was the other second aspect of the public participation being held in days which are constitutionally recognized as religious days. That is on for the Seventh-day Adventist was on Sabbath, the Islam on Friday. So that's another issue, because the courts have pronounced themselves a number of times that religious liberty is something which has got to be respected. So those issues will be able to be discussed at length to be able to determine whether that public participation process was actually something which we can be able to take home. There is the other debate whether the Senate should be able to have their own process of public participation. So that one, the jury is still out. We're waiting to see what the Senate will be able to do. If they rely on the public participation of Parliament, which was, of course, from some circles, people might be able to have some reservations on the same, then the whole process is going to be tainted from a legal perspective. So it's very important that we are towing on a very thin line on issues public participation, because that is a constitutional question, not even political. Impeachment is a political process, but the public participation is a paradigm which has been put in there that the public needs to be consulted. So if that threshold was never reached, then I think if that ends up in court, then the court will be able to examine whether that was actually something which could be considered as a ground for rendering the process to have been successful or unsuccessful in this particular case.
Before I get Kinywa's thoughts on whether that then can form the basis of a legal argument for the DP's team in the event it goes all the way to the court, let me just ask you, Gibson. No?
Yeah.
The president is quiet.
I think I seem to concur with him being quiet, because impeachment is really not a presidential aspect. It's a parliamentary process. So if you are the person who your deputy is being impeached, then if you dare raise a finger or say something, then that will be construed. So he wants the process to go unperturbed, without any influence. It's akin to a divorce. If a man, if a woman goes to court that wants to divorce from the wife, if I might hypothetically use that process, when the woman is out there saying all the other things, you also don't jump in and start saying, even you did 1, 2, 3. You keep quiet. Let the process go. You prove your things in court. I mean, at a future date, if you want to be able to give some information of what really transpired, then it works better that way when you keep quiet.
Okay.
That people cannot be able to throw some shade on you.
Okay, before I bring in Kinywa, let me just hear from Keaton Fields.
Yes.
That silence, what do you think would be the potential repercussions?
First of all, it will require a higher force to displace a higher force. This is a second in command, Protocol 2. And if you see such an impeachment of such a magnitude, it requires a higher political goodwill. Because if you were to ask yourself and to do the observation, for you to do such a process, you must undertake public participation. And the first thing is, for you to do such a magnitude of public participation, you require resources. How the resources were approved and how the public participation was done, with full flair and being supervised by the security. Then the only implication that you can get is it was sanctioned by Gravity 1, a higher force than that of the second command. We don't know which force, but it was a force higher than the second command for such an exercise to be done.
Okay.
But the silence also will be strategic because, constitutionally speaking, the president is a sign of national unity. And if he were to descend directly in such an arena of politics, then it will taint, and it will also cause division within his party and the entire nation. But of course we know, and from what is not said, you can always observe that it will only require a force higher than the second protocol to displace the second protocol.
Okay. Let me bring in Kinywa, and because Keaton spoke about public participation.
Yes.
Do you see that as, in the event that it goes all the way to the court, as being one of the arguments that the DP's team can put forth? And number two, there are those people who are asking, does the DP really know his boss?
Yes.
Okay, because if you look at the history of this country, we have had a history of presidents and deputy presidents. From the first president, we remember Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, then it moved on to the second president, we remember, and on to the third. Remember President Moi with Professor George Saitoti saying that, politics is not about friendship, and so on and so forth. So if you look at that landscape, you see an issue between presidents and their deputies.
Yes.
So how important is it for a second in command to learn, his boss, to know the boss?
Yes.
Yeah. How important is that?
Firstly, on the issue of public participation, I concur fully with my colleagues. The issue of public participation is one of the linchpins that will be used by the Deputy President's legal team to fight this impeachment in courts. And the reason is that straight from the High Court to the Supreme Court, the participation of the public, as enshrined in Article 10 and other constitutional articles in our Constitution, it's very important that the people be involved in anything that Parliament is doing, whether legislative or in terms of oversight. We've seen the finance bill that became an act, the Finance Act of 2023, being thrown out by the courts, though it's an issue still in the court, thrown out on the issue of that public participation. And if you can remember, Tom, on Friday, the 4th of October, the National Assembly purported to have a public participation exercise in all counties. And on the same date, the High Court in Kirogoya, sitting in Kirogoya, held that and passed an order that public participation should be done in all the constituencies in our country. And the National Assembly clerk did respond and claim that, and say that they were going to abide by those orders of the High Court. But they did not. And we've even seen the Senator, is it for Kitui? Or no, Makueni. Dan Maanzo saying that in a place like Kibwezi, there is no public participation that was done. Even in the constituency that I live in, or the one that I come from, I didn't see any public participation being done at the constituency level. And so that is one of the issues that will be used, because counties are very vast. You will have some people going dozens of kilometers. So are you saying that that person was well represented if at all they had to use so many resources to actually go to a hall, one hall in the county, to give their opinion?
So public participation is obviously going to be one of those issues that
it's going to be very
likely to see come up.
Yes.
You know, should the process go to the courts.
Yes. And remember, one of the things that we need to look at the essence of the attack of the Deputy President's legal team towards this impeachment, straight from the start to the end. One of the main issues will be about the procedure. Because here we have procedure and we have substance. If the procedure is flawed, then it doesn't matter whether he did all those things that he's accused of and that you are able to prove them, or that you had reason to impeach him for them. So public participation is going to be straight, it's going to go down to that, it's going to be part of the procedure that will be questioned.
It's going to be a center bolt in that process. Okay. What about the question, the long history of fallouts between presidents and their deputies, especially in the context that Katiba 2010 is now active?
I like that you've, because my answer was going to be focused on that last issue that you've mentioned. We've seen situations where presidents have fallen out with deputy presidents, straight from when Kenya became a republic. What is unique about the situation since the fourth president of this republic took over is that those two presidencies, this one and the last one, the previous one, were based on a new constitution where you couldn't just fire your deputy or your vice president, was a vice president at the time. But right now we have a situation where the role of the deputy president is protected by the constitution. Hence that very difficult way of removing him from power. Once the president, and the law says, and there are cases that have said that once I choose, or you choose me, Tom, as your running mate, you have nominated me, and then it's up for the IBC to clear me. But once that process goes on and we win the election, it's a joint ticket. So, but at the same time, as much as those constitutional protections are there, we know who holds the arm and the knife. Just like in the previous government. So I can say that as a deputy president, I was elected with Tom, President Tom, and I can go and make a lot of noise out there. But the thing is, Tom has the instruments of power. So I might be there, but I might be very frustrated. I might cut a very frustrated figure.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So as we wind down, Gibson, what is that new thing that we have not seen in Parliament, you know, that we should expect at the Senate?
What we need, of course, from my expectations, there's nothing surprising or about the decision of Parliament, that's the National Assembly. What I'm expecting to see is how that voice of reason come to the floor of the House or the Senate, and then we are able to see a substantive debate, because what I saw in Parliament largely could not be able to amount to, because there are some issues when he presented his memorandum and his speech, there are some issues the Deputy President raised. But I think whatever reason he gave, nobody really had time to listen to it.
Okay.
It was kind of a process that it had been determined. You have to go, you have to go. So we need to see a clear process happening, a fair process whereby whatever he has raised, these issues have got to be canvassed by the members of Parliament. They have the memorandum. They have been given what has come from the National Assembly. So we expect a conclusive debate, which at the end of the day, if they really find a decision that indeed they have to impeach him, then they will have discussed these issues point by point.
Okay. Your final thoughts? We've had Wakili, substantive debate and canvassing issues raised by the Deputy President's team. Your final thoughts?
My final thoughts revolve on Senate. Senate has to be sober. They have to show that they are impartial. We cannot have a situation like the one we had in the National Assembly, where the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker said outside the National Assembly, before even the motion was tabled, that the Deputy President should be impeached. We need sobriety from Senate, so that regardless of the decision that they're going to make, we need to see a very fair process.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, fair process. And your final comments, Wakili Kittons?
My final comment is, Senate being a trial house is obliged to hear both the National Assembly and His Excellency the Deputy President. And the standard of proof that will be expected is that of in slightly above the balance of probability as settled in the Wambora case. And irrespective of the decision that they are going to make, there are certain issues that will also come up. Like the question on what amounts to the 2/3 of the 67. Is it a delegation vote, or is it the whole House vote? And the law has been settled in the county quality that it should be 2/3, meaning 44 point something, meaning it should be 45. So that also the House Speaker will also have to rule on that issue, and also on the threshold. But be that as it may, it is a political process. And it is only open for the constitutional bodies of the Senate and the National Assembly to determine. And going forward, I also expect that the courts will also exercise judicial restraint. And based on the previous precedents on the question of public participation, it has not been settled in the law. It is still a gray area. The other question of unfair trial, I think it has always been demonstrated. So let's look at and see what will transpire tomorrow.
Absolutely. And of course, the clock is ticking. I want to thank my panelists, Keaton Fields, Kinyua Machina, and Gibson Gisore for those insights. We're taking a short break. We'll be back. Don't go away.